Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us once again here on Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. I'm your host, Nipasa Pradhan, and it's seriously an absolute pleasure to be here once again with another very insightful webinar lined up for you. But before we move ahead with today's discussion, I have this very important disclaimer, and that is by watching our videos, you agree and understand that the information provided by our experts and attorneys, including comments and replies from users, is not legal advice. Use of information is at your own risk. So, friends, thank you once again for joining us here on Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. And this is a great place for you to be in, especially if you want to know more about U.S. immigration and business opportunities, because we are going to dive into a topic, that has definitely sparked significant interest. So, how entrepreneurs and investors can be on the ground doing business in the U.S. in under 6 months. And yes, to help us, dive deeper into the key insights on E-2 and L-1 visas, we are going to be honored by the presence of none other than our guest for today, um, Mr. David R. Fullmer, an exceptional immigration attorney and a leader in his field. So, Mr. Fullmer is a partner at WR Immigration with over 2 decades of exclusive practice in immigration law. He's been recognized as Immigration Lawyer of the Year and is celebrated for his expertise in assisting companies, entrepreneurs, and even entertainers, navigate immigration challenges. So, for all our viewers, whether you are an entrepreneur, dreaming of setting up a shop in the United States or your business, or maybe an HR professional overseeing visa processes. Well, thank you so much, all you immigration enthusiasts, for being here. And without further ado, please help me welcome our guest, Attorney David Fullmer. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, Nipasa. I'm thrilled to be here.
Absolutely lovely. And I'm so excited because this is the first time you're here. And we would love to get to know you better. Maybe tell us more about yourself and anything else is something interesting to share if you have any.
Well, I'm lucky enough to live in Los Angeles, and it's an amazing place to live. Our offices are steps from the beach, and I also live about 5 minutes from the beach. So it's an amazing place to be. It's an amazing place to welcome immigrants from other countries, and I think it really exemplifies the best that the United States has to offer. So I'm really happy to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. And I can only imagine what a great vibe you must be surrounded with. I mean, the beach always gives you good things, I think, the sunshine and a lot of palm maybe. But yes, I can only imagine. So thank you so much. And well, with regard to today's topic of discussion, how entrepreneurs and investors can be on ground doing business in the US in under 6 months. So, what can folks out there who have joined us or will be joining us in this session, what can they expect from us today?
Well, today we're going to talk about e-visas and L visas, and these visas really do present an opportunity for people to kind of direct their own destiny. A lot of times people think about coming to the United States on an H-1B visa, which is amazing and it's great, but it requires them to find a job offer. Or they think about maybe being petitioned under EB-2 or EB-3, and those are amazing as well, but it requires both a job offer and a very long wait. But E2 and L1 are really opportunities where if you're from the right country, in the case of an E2, and if you have the funds and if you have a business plan, that you can actually direct your own destiny and move to the United States, bring your family to the US. It's an opportunity for people's spouses to work or for their kids to be part of the US education system, all based on their own funds, their own business plans.
Absolutely, friends. Today we are going to discuss about E2 and L1 visas, and especially all you folks out there who are businessmen and who want to maybe expand your business go start a business, great place to be in. So, yes, I think without further ado, I have my first question for you, David. And this is with regard to this change of administration. How might President Trump's immigration policies impact pathways for entrepreneurs? and the processing of L-1 and E-2 visas, considering the administration's historical focus on stricter visa regulations?
That's a very good question, and the answer is not necessarily straightforward. There's two things we can look at. First of all, we can look at the prior Trump administration and what they did, and then we can look at some other issues relating to the incoming Trump administration. So, first of all, looking back historically, the prior Trump administration implemented a policy called Buy American, Hire American, and the idea of that policy was that in relation to any visa or any immigration process, they wanted to make sure that um, issuing a visa for that individual would not hurt the wages and working opportunities for U.S. citizens. So it was always a part of, during the Trump era, we always had to demonstrate that jobs would be created. With E&L visas, that's already part of the program. So that's one thing. Next, um, over the last few years, a lot of U.S. consulates have been waiving in-person interviews. And what that's done is, I wouldn't expect that interviews would be waived for E&L visas, but waiving of interviews for, say, people who are getting extensions of their H-1B visa has kind of opened up resources for quicker processing of other visa types like E-2s. And so getting rid of interview waivers will probably cause some delays. If you'd want, I can talk a little bit about another interesting aspect of it, Nipasa, which is
Sure.
um, everyone knows that Donald Trump has been very close to Elon Musk. Now, Elon Musk is a
Right.
business leader from Silicon Valley, and so we're also hoping that Elon Musk will have President-elect Trump's ear, and he might influence him to be a little bit kinder and gentler and a little bit more efficient when it comes to visa issuance. So on one hand, we can expect things to be stricter and slower, but we're hoping possibly that Elon Musk might have some influence and might be able to influence things in a positive way.
Absolutely. And looking at how close they are, I think he might as well. And both of them business minded, they would love to soar with regard to business. So I'm sure this is going
Absolutely.
to be good. And right, right. But yes, on the other hand, like you were saying, like stricter rules, and maybe they are going to just make the situation even harder, that they, finally drain out or give up and just go away to their own countries. Who knows?
Absolutely.
So,
I mean, I think that we will have more RFEs. Normally, when you file an L-1 petition, there's always going to be a chance that you could have a request for additional evidence. During the prior Trump administration, there were a lot more requests for evidence, and so I think we can
right,
expect more requests for evidence, which will cause processing times to extend a little bit.
right, right. All right. So, folks, we have mixed things to look forward to, but I think it's always best to stay on the right path and do the right thing and keep your documents right. And there is no limit to your dreams. So keep dreaming high and work for it. Yeah. All
Absolutely.
right. At this moment, I would like to say hi to Sneha. Thank you so much for joining us here on YouTube. I can already see your comments. Stay with us. All right. We are going to address your questions a little later in this webinar. Now, moving on, David, I have the second question, and this is, for entrepreneurs looking to establish their presence in the United States, quickly, especially, they don't have time to wait or don't want to wait that long. What are the critical steps to secure an E-2 or an L-1 visa within 6 months? Is it possible?
It is possible. So first of all, the key point with relation to an E-2 visa is um, the individual needs to be from a treaty country. And the US has E-2 treaties with many countries, but not every country. We have E-2 treaties with about 85 countries, but we do not have them with the BRICS countries. So not Brazil, Russia, India, China, or South Africa. But if you are from an E-2 country, then the E-2 is a possibility. Otherwise, you have to go through an L-1 visa, which has additional requirements. So if you're from an E-2 treaty country, the first thing you'll need to do is really set up a business plan, decide what type of business you would like to be in the United States. Then you'll have to set up an entity in the United States. You have to set up a corporation or an LLC, register it with the Secretary of State in that state, get a tax ID number, set up a bank account, and and then you can fund the company, and that's really the first step.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, David. I think that makes us hopeful at least. And maybe are there any tips or maybe additional things that folks can keep in mind when they are in a hurry to be out there in the US?
Well, I think it's good to be in a hurry, but more importantly, to be in a hurry is to make sure that they're in a business that's going to be successful in the United States. So first of all, I recommend that they look at themselves, look at their history, look at what they're good at, and look where they could be competitive in the United States because the business environment in the US is very competitive. And so rather than being in a rush, I think people should analyze where they think they can have an impact, where they can be successful in the United States. Once they've done that, yes, then they need to connect with advisors in the US, both an immigration attorney, a business attorney, to set up the US entity. And then another key thing is to find a general manager in the US that can kind of help them be um, feet on the ground because there's a lot of things that they may not be able to do from overseas before they obtain the visa. And even if they come to the United States, they wouldn't be allowed to work until they obtain the visa. So hiring a general manager to be really feet on the ground will also be very, very key thing to help them to be able to move this ahead quickly.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, David, for, walking us through and giving us tips on how to quickly, get yourself ready for an E1 or an L1, for an E2 or an L1. Thank you. Thank you. So now moving on to my next question is how can, a startup entrepreneur from a treaty country, demonstrate a substantial and non-marginal investment for an E2 visa while meeting current USCIS standards?
Definitely. So really, that's two questions. There are several requirements to obtain an E2 visa. One is the investment needs to be substantial, and then the regulations say that the business cannot be marginal, which is kind
Mhm.
of a strange word. What does marginal mean? Well, they go on to explain that a marginal business is a business that only generates enough revenue to support the investor and his own family. And so the rule says the business cannot be marginal, which means that it needs to be successful enough and generate enough revenue to hire US workers. So, really, what it should have said is that the business will support US workers. And so I believe that goes back really to the business plan. The government needs to be able to review the business plan and see that the businessman makes sense, business plan makes sense, see that it's logical and believable that the company will be able to generate revenue so that it can employ US workers. So that's marginality. You asked me about substantiality. The regulations also say that the investment needs to be substantial. And I have my clients all the time ask me, David, how much is substantial? And I wish that the government would tell us exactly what they want. In another context, in the EB-5 program, the law specifically says 800,000 or 1,050,000. But in the E2 context, the rules only say substantial. So what is substantial? It really goes back to the same thing that I said relating to marginality. And that the investment needs to be enough so that the government believes that the business will be successful and generate revenue both to support the investor and the U.S. workers. However, I think there are some limits to what is substantial. Sometimes have people asking me, David, can I apply for a visa with a $20,000 investment or $50,000 investment? I haven't seen E2s being issued with under $100,000 investment, and I'm often seeing people investing, around 200,000. Again, the law doesn't say, doesn't give a specific amount, but usually lately I'm seeing people investing at least a couple $100,000.
Right, right, David. And that's a lot. I mean, for folks out there who were just expecting to start something within 20, I mean, they have to go five times more. So
Well,
there
that's
you go.
the. I
And
think we're gonna get
yes,
to that
it's
later, I believe. But sometimes if somebody doesn't have that type of funding, then an L1 visa would probably be a better route.
all right. So we're getting to that. Thank you, David. Thank you for, telling us about USCIS standards and the E2 visa bit. And also, Vikas has joined with a few questions. Vikas, please stay with us. We are going to address your questions a little later, but thank you so much for joining. And now moving on, David, what are the key industries or business models that are currently seeing faster approvals for E-2 and L-1 visa applications?
So, what I can't tell you is what models are being approved or being approved more quickly because it's really wide open. What I can tell you is models that won't work. And models that won't work are the passive um, businesses. I have a lot of people telling me, David, I want to buy a house. I live close to Malibu. I want to buy a house in Malibu. It's going to cost $10 million. That's a substantial investment. Can I get a visa with that? The answer is no.
Mhm.
It is an investment. It is substantial, but it's not going to meet the marginality requirement. It's not going to. It's not a business at all. It's not going to generate income for anyone. I have other people
Right.
asking me if they can be passive investors in minority interests in companies. So, can they be essentially investors and get visas? And the answer is also generally no, because that is not an active business that generates employment for U.S. workers. So, what we're looking for is active businesses. Some common ones common ones are restaurants. Restaurants require a lot of human capital and require a lot of funding. So that's a very common business. But I've seen people obtain visas from almost every industry. It simply has to be an active business and not a passive investment.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for telling us about that as well. And anything important about USCIS standards to keep in mind? Maybe something, when people out there are trying to fit themselves with an E-2 or L-1. Anything else to keep in mind?
There are a lot of things to keep in mind. The focus really is on will the business support the U.S. workers? That's a
Right.
very key point to always keep in mind. A lot of people think, yeah, they can invest and get to the U.S. and kind of figure it out from there. But when they invest, they need to when they apply for the visa, they need to submit a pretty detailed business plan, and the business
Yes.
plan needs to spell out, their business model, how they think they're going to be able to generate business, what they're going to do in the U.S., and how they're going to, generate enough revenue to create and maintain U.S. jobs. So I think that's a really key point, and it's going to be more important
Right.
during the Trump administration.
Right. So the question is it going to benefit the United States? And that's what you
Absolutely,
should keep in mind.
absolutely. I mean, I know that it will benefit the foreign investor, but what does the U.S. government care about? How it's
Exactly.
going to
Yes.
benefit the U.S. They want to see that those funds have been put into the U.S. economy and spent. So it's not just that they take that 100 or 200,000 and put it in their U.S. business bank account. They want to see that most of that has been utilized and spent and pushed out into the U.S. economy, and that U.S. workers are going to be hired. So it's a win-win. The foreign investor will be able to live in the U.S. Their spouse will be
Right.
able to work. Kids will be able to go to school. They'll be able to do business in the U.S. and the U.S. will benefit quite a bit from each E2
Exactly.
or L1 that comes into the U.S.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. Thank you so much for the detailed explanation. And now moving on, if a new entrepreneur already has an operating business abroad, what documentation is critical to establish the connection needed for an L1A visa?
Absolutely. So if they already have a business operating abroad, that's a huge head start, and so they will be able to obtain what we call a new office L1. But before they can apply, they need to set up their U.S. Entity, and the U.S. entity has to have a qualifying relationship with the foreign business. So that can be that the U.S. business is a wholly owned subsidiary of the foreign business, that it's a sister company of a common parent, that it's at least a 51% subsidiary, or that the US business has the exact same ownership in the same percentages as the foreign business. So we call this a qualifying relationship. And this is a very, very key initial issue that needs to be addressed each time.
All right, David. Thank you so much for that and for the detailed explanation. I think now we should move ahead to our next question. And That is, what factors should an entrepreneur consider when selecting the US location for their new business under an E-2 visa?
Absolutely. So a lot of people just want to do business in the United States. Other people understand that the US is a very large, very diverse country with really 50 different jurisdictions inside of it. Each of the US states have their own cultures, their own laws, and they even have their own taxation systems. So before they set up business in the US, I believe that people should talk to a tax advisor to determine if one state will be better than another. I have a lot of people that want to do business in, say, Florida or Texas because there is no state income tax. I have other people that don't really care about taxation. They want to be by the beach. And so they're going to live in Los Angeles or Florida, some even in Hawaii. And so really it's a personal decision taking into consideration the business climate, taxation, and personal preferences.
All right, David. Thank you so much for, getting us through, for establishing a good connection that is required for an L-1A visa. Now, moving on, I have another question, and that is about E-2 visas. So, how can small businesses, now, especially after the pandemic, I think we see a lot of new businesses coming up. I think during that time, almost every household, or many households, they started their new businesses from home, from online and everything. So I think that trend is still on. And nowadays, everybody shopping online, I think it's become a very big thing, startup businesses and everything. So, how can small businesses, and first time investors overcome the common challenges of proving their business viability for an E-2 visa?
That's a very good question. You talked about people doing business, kind of side gigs from home. The new E2, the Foreign Affairs Manual relating to E2 visas says that an E2 visa can't operate out of a home office. But how can they do a good job of establishing that they are a viable business? I believe number one, even though the regulations say they can have a home office, they need to have physical presence. Next, a lot of businesses nowadays are service businesses. I mean, even me as a lawyer, this is service industry. It doesn't take a lot of capital to set up a law practice. It takes a computer and a good connection to the internet. But and many other businesses are like that. They don't require much capital investment. But to be a good E2 business, in order to obtain a visa, it has to be the kind of business that does require capital investment. So it has to be the type of business that requires an office or a plant or a facility and inventory. So these are some key points. That physical space, and it has to require that investment, and it has to be invested in the right
Okay.
thing. Yeah.
Okay. No, you were saying you can
Okay.
continue.
Yes. I was contacted by some people from Canada, and they had invested about 100,000, and they wanted to open up a business where they were going to set up Airbnbs. And it sounded good
Mhm.
because I know in order to set up Airbnbs, they have to either purchase or lease a property. They have to outfit it with furniture and technology. And so I thought it could be good. When I looked at what they put their money into, they put their first 50,000 into courses on how to be successful in the Airbnb industry. And while those might be tax deductible according to the IRS, I didn't believe that those would be considered to be proper investments for the E2 visa. So the investment has to go into the right area.
Right. And well, when you say right area, like that has to still benefit US, and only then they can be considered, right? So if in case they do not benefit the US, or there is like a chance that the US does not need this kind of business, there are chances that they can never start that business, right?
Well, so first of all, you ask, what if the investment does not benefit the U.S.? So I've seen some scenarios where somebody sets up a business, so they make an investment, they set up a storefront, and they
Hmm.
purchase supplies and equipment, but then they purchase the inventory from a foreign country. And I'm asked, well, does that purchase count as part of the investment. It does, but I believe that it might not get full credit. I believe that the U.S. government will probably favor purchases that come from the United States, especially under the Trump administration, where we're going to have the Buy American, Hire American
Right.
policies. And so, yes,
Right.
if the government, if the U.S. consulate does not believe that the investment is substantial, and this is, again, the numeric number is not set in stone. They don't feel like it's enough. If they don't like it, they can deny it. They have a lot of discretion to deny the visa application.
All right, David, thank you so much for, walking us through, L1A visa and how important is it, for an entrepreneur to prove that they are going to benefit the US, and of course that they are doing the right kind of business, and maybe they are very innovative. So yes, thank you so much. And now moving on,
One
I
other
have
quick
an
point. Oh,
sorry. Sorry, yes, David, please say.
if it's okay, one other quick point. Um, the business that they're in the United States needs to be legal according to U.S. federal law. And I've seen a few people from countries like Canada operating in an area that's technically legal in some other countries and legal according to some states, but not legal according to U.S. federal law. What I'm talking about is anything related to cannabis or marijuana. In California, according to state law, it's generally legal to purchase and if you have the right licenses to sell. But according to U.S. federal law, it's not legal. So people, if they want to obtain a U.S. visa, they should stay 100% away from any industry that has the taint of being connected to something that's illegal, even according to U.S. federal law.
Right, very important thing to keep in mind. So, folks, thank you so much, David, for highlighting that. And folks out there, that's a very, very important thing. So, Vikas, thank you so much for more questions. We are going to come to that. But I think at this moment, it's time for a short break. So, folks out there, you can also have a one on one discussion if you're loving David's ideas, advices, and knowledge. And maybe you want to consult him with regard to your case. Why not contact him as well? You can call him on his number, and his phone number is 310-570-4065. And you can even email him, dfullmer at wolfsdorf.com. DFULLMER at WOLFSDORF.com. And yes, go visit www.wolfsdorf.com. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned to Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. Well, I'm Nipasa Pradhan with none other than attorney David Fullmer. Hello and welcome back, everyone, to Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. This is the second half of the webinar we are having, and I'm Nipasa Pradhan with today's guest, none other than attorney David Fullmer. Yes, he is an amazing immigration attorney who is based out of Los Angeles, and it's such a great honor and a pleasure to have you here with us. Today, we're discussing about how entrepreneurs and investors can be on the ground doing business in the US in under 6 months. So it's been a great discussion so far, and we have a lot more questions to cover. And also, folks out there who have questions for us, Vikas and Sneha, we are going to take up your questions. And I would also like to ask you folks to also join us in this conversation. You can participate by asking your questions in the comment section wherever you've joined us from. We are streaming live on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and X. And yes, David, it's been a great discussion so far. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you. So, I have another question, and that is what are the primary differences between E-2 and L-1 visas that we are discussing today? Both for entrepreneurs, and how should one decide the best fit based on their business goals?
Absolutely. So first of all, the first thing to look at is whether or not an individual is from a treaty country. So if they're from a treaty country, then both possibilities are on the table. But if they're not from a treaty country, then the E-2 can be dismissed. Secondarily, the the business needs to be majority owned by individuals from the treaty country. So if we have a transferee from a treaty country, but the business is majority owned by his partners who are from another country, that's not going to work. So first we look at the treaty country. If the individual is from a treaty country, then E and L are both on the table. Next thing we would look at is whether or not the investment is substantial. As I mentioned before, E2 does require a larger investment. And so if the investors were thinking that they were going to set up a business with a lower amount, let's say $40,000, $50,000, then they would definitely they should definitely go toward an L1 instead of an E2. Now, if the investment is substantial and they're from a treaty country, then which is better, E or L? There's some factors to consider. First of all, for a new office L1, they're only going to get a 1-year visa, where with an E2, depending on where they're from, they might get a visa that's valid for up to 5 years. And so if they're looking at saving costs and kind of getting it done and not having to worry about it in the future, then perhaps an E2 is better than an L1. However, with an L1, the L1 new office rules do allow them to apply essentially based on a business plan. And so theoretically, maybe it's a little bit less work in the business setup to obtain an L1 than it is to obtain an E2. Now, the other big difference is that an L1 visa is a dual intent visa, where an E2 is not technically a dual intent visa. That means that when you obtain an L1, you can have the plan and intention to obtain permanent residency in the United States. Where with an E2, you need to have the plan to depart from the United States once you're done doing business in the United States. That's a big difference. Finally, an L1 visa allows for an opportunity for applying for immigration or green card under the EB1C category, where E2 does not necessarily present that opportunity. So these are some factors to consider when you're trying to determine which is better, E2 or L1.
Thank you so much for highlighting the differences, David. And I'm sure, folks out there who are in the dilemma where to categorize themselves, they have a clearer picture now. Thank you so much. And moving on, now I have another question, and that is, w- if an entrepreneur, if an entrepreneur's visa is tied to a new business that faces unforeseen challenges or restructuring, what options do they have to maintain compliance and their immigration status?
That's a good question. And this comes up a lot because plans are great. But once they obtain the visa and arrive in the United States, sometimes business does not go according to plan. In fact, maybe it does it never goes exactly according to plan. But what happens if, they get to the United States on their E or L visa and it's really slow. It's hard to get customers. And so First of all, on an E-2 visa, if they obtain a 5-year E-2 visa, they do have a little bit longer to turn the business around. Maybe they can't maintain all of the employees throughout the whole 5-year period, but they need to make sure that they have been able to turn the business around by the time it's time to renew the visa. And secondarily, they cannot close the business. So let's say that somebody has an E-2 visa and it's tough and they can't maintain all of their employees. If it's a retail store and they close the store and they're no longer in business, then they're no longer in status. So they need to keep on trying. Sometimes that means reinvesting, investing more capital. It might mean changing the business model slightly. It might even mean changing the location slightly. But they need to stay in business to stay in status and stay in compliance in the United States. If somebody gets a new office L-1, they only get a 1-year visa. And so the pressure is on to be successful and to step up within the first year. And if business is tough, if the contracts aren't coming and the money isn't flowing in, they do have the option again to invest more money to maintain the business and to be able to get that extension after the first year.
Okay. Thank you, David. Thank you so much for, walking us through. And now moving on, I have this next question, which frequently comes in mind, and we find them a lot in our groups also. And, folks out there have this question. So how can entrepreneur, transitioning from a visitor visa to an E-2 visa ensure that they meet the strict timeline requirements for operating the business in the US?
That's a good question. So first of all, I would hope that if someone is entering the US as a visitor with the plan of obtaining an E-2, that they enter on B-1 instead of B-2. Because usually when people obtain a B visa, it's B-1/B-2. So if they
Yes.
enter the US on a B-1, then they're going to have 6 months to either depart from the US, or technically they may be even able to file the change of status in the US from B-1 to E-2 status. So if they know what they're doing and if they have 6 months, that should generally be long enough to go through the steps of, again, setting up the entity, registering with the Secretary of State, getting a tax ID number, opening a bank account, transferring the funds, and then setting up shop. So if they know what they're doing, 6 months is long enough. If they have no idea, then it's going to be more difficult. If someone has no idea what they're going to do, they should probably look into a franchise, because a franchise will kind of have the business plan spelled out. So they should probably talk to a franchise broker and see if there's an opportunity that they're interested in an area that they're interested in, and that's within their budget. And then a franchise should offer a way for them to be able to kind of roll forward pretty quickly, even if they don't know quite what they want to do.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, David, for that advice and tip, I would say. So now moving on, I have this next question, and that is, for investors planning to use an L-1 visa to expand their company into the US. So what strategies can help them build a stronger case for a new office, for a new office petition while ensuring the timely approval?
Absolutely. So first of all, it's really important to look at the foreign business and the person's role within the business to make sure that they're going to be able to be categorized as a manager. Um, so, the L-1A visa is the visa for foreign executives or managers that are transferring into the United States to be managers or executives in the United States. It's very important to kind of look at the position abroad first before you launch the case into the United States. So, is the person a manager? A manager has 3 subcategories. It can be an executive in a large company, a C-suite executive. It can be somebody who is what's called a personnel manager, who manages 2 levels of staff beneath them, or it can be a function manager who doesn't necessarily have direct reports, but who manages a very essential function of the business through indirect reports. So, first of all, um, do they qualify based on their current position? And that's really the first step before even thinking about launching that business in the US. If they don't qualify, they need a year of qualifying time. Maybe they should adjust their position and wait 1 year so that they qualify, and so they will not have any problems when they launch the business in the United States.
All right. All right. Thank you so much, David. I think that would really help all of us, and it has definitely given us a clearer picture on how to go about either E2 or L1, or where can they actually fit themselves in. And I think now we should definitely go address these questions we have from our viewers. And I will take up Sneha, our first viewer, and her questions. So she says, I've already set up a business in my home country, but I want to expand to the US. How quickly can I establish a US branch under the L1 visa? And what steps should I prioritize to ensure a smooth application?
So, first of all, again, it's great that she has her business set up overseas. That's excellent. The question is there enough going on in that business to support an L1 visa? So, it's going to have a number of employees in order for her to be deemed to be a manager. So, I would, in an ideal world, I'd like to see it have 10 or 12 employees at least, and a structure that's with a hierarchy where she's at the top, there are mid level managers beneath her, and then the workers below her. That would be what's called a personnel manager. So before she thinks about setting up in the US, make sure she's built up her foreign business. Also, the foreign business needs to be strong enough that when she transfers to the US, it continues to be in business. Because if she gets the L1 visa and the business outside of the United States, winds down, then the L1 visa is no longer valid. So it needs to be really built up and strong enough to be able to support the transfer. Next, the procedure of setting up the entity in the US is really quite easy. But the first thing she should do is talk to tax advisors and see if they have any suggestions on the structure and the location. There are a couple of ways it can be done. It can be done as a subsidiary of the foreign business, as a sister company of a common parent, or the shares could even be owned by her individually as long as the foreign business and the U.S. business are owned by the same shareholders in the same percentages. So um, strengthen the foreign business, get tax advice, and then get an attorney to help you set up the U.S. entity.
There you go. It's always best to have a US attorney, to help you navigate or, guide you through any of your visas, because they are the experts and they know that each case is different and every case is special and every case needs special attention. So, yes, thank you so much, David, for taking that up for Sneha. And, I would like to share my screen now because we have more questions in our groups. So, I think I'd like to take them up first before we take up Vikas' question. So, let's take this one. This is from an anonymous participant asking, my L1B petition was approved on 15th of August in premium processing. Still, I have been waiting for the approval petition, and my company visa team is saying they are yet to receive the petition documents from attorney. Usually, how long does it take to receive the approved petition? That's the question.
So the question says that the application was filed through premium processing. And so when something is approved through premium processing, generally the attorney who filed the petition will receive the approved I-797 within about a week. And if it's not received within about a week, then the attorney or the petitioner should contact USCIS. Because premium processing was utilized, there's a little bit more customer service. And so the attorney or the petitioner can email premium processing to tell them they have not received the approved I-797. It should not take long. If it was approved in August, here we are in November, that's a problem. And that should be aggressively followed up on because there's no reason for that to happen these days.
Right, that means that is not a good scene. But thank you so much, David, for taking that up and for
Absolutely.
the answer. Now I have this next one. This is also from an anonymous participant asking, when looking at the wait times of interview waiver for L1 visa, it doesn't give any information on wait times. It's just blank. Also, when looking for an appointment for Dropbox for L1, it doesn't show any slots. Are there any changes to the process for L1 visa renewal stamping? Also, did anyone get it done in Mexico instead?
Okay, so we have a few questions here. First of all, I think first of all, they're asking about interview times for an L-1 under visa wait time. So the Department of State has a web page that's called Visa Wait Times. So you can Google it, you can find it. It says Visa Wait Times. You type in the city, and it will tell you the common wait times for each different type of a visa. And for some, and from consulates in some categories, it'll tell you the waiting time for interviews and interview waivers. So if it doesn't list it for interview waivers, sometimes what we have to do is kind of analogize it. So if it doesn't say L1 interview waivers, perhaps you can look and see what it is for H1 interview waivers and get a general idea of what it's going to be. Nipasa, can you bring it up on the screen so I can see the rest of the question?
Sure.
Um, when looking for an appointment, Dropbox L1 doesn't show any slots. It could be that they're not allowing for Dropbox appointments for L1s.
Mhm.
If it's not showing any slots, or you may have to email the consulate and see if they'll respond to you about that. Processing in Mexico. So processing in third countries may be a possibility. Um, I can't say I have done too many in Mexico lately, but it may be a possibility. What you want to make sure is if you're processing in a third country, you have a visa to get into that third country. That can be an issue sometimes.
Okay.
And you may want to contact the consulate to make sure that they're open to processing the visa there if it's a third country.
All right. Thank you, David. Thank you so much for that insight, and that was really helpful, I'm sure. Now, moving on, I have this next one. This is from Naluri asking, is it okay to apply L1A extension in premium now? Bunch of thanks in advance for your response here.
There's no reason to not apply for an L1 under premium processing right now. It's available. And generally, these days, people utilize premium processing whenever it is available. Sometimes there are strategic reasons when you won't want to, but in most cases, people are utilizing premium processing on any category that's available, and I don't see a problem with it in general.
All right. Thank you so much, David, for taking that up. Now, I have another question, and this is also from another Facebook group from an anonymous participant. What are supporting documents required for converting L1B to L1A category?
Okay, so that's a good question. L1B is for someone with specialized knowledge. L1A is for a manager, and so the assumption is that you were probably in your home country were working in specialized knowledge. When you transferred to the U.S., you were working specialized knowledge, and now you've been promoted into a manager, or you will be promoted into a managerial category. And so you'll have to prove that the employer does have a position for you that fits the managerial category. And so, what does
Mhm.
that mean? Usually, you're going to have a detailed job description. You'll have to have an organizational chart to show the people that are going to report to you, and you usually have to demonstrate what um, titles and what duties those people have, so the government can see that you really are turning into a people manager from a specialist.
All right. Very interesting. Thank you so much for taking that up, David. And um, thank you, anonymous participant, for the question. Well, I have another one. This is also from another group. Another anonymous participant asking, has anyone recently got their L1A extension stamped in Canada? Please share your experience. We don't want to travel all the way to India. So this person is from India originally.
Absolutely. Canada and Mexico technically have jurisdiction over people who are physically present in the United States, and so it is theoretically possible. I'm not seeing it happening a lot these days, but it is possible. Obviously, it's a shorter trip. A lot of people
Mhm.
still want to go back home because if they stay in Canada, they're going to be have to probably get a visa to get into Canada. They're going to have to stay in a hotel for a week
Mhm.
or 10 days and 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 there's usually a longer wait time if you're applying in a third country. So people from Canada will have priority over people who
Oh,
are third country nationals. So even though
oh,
it's theoretically possible, a lot of people would rather go back to their home country.
oh, that's very, very interesting, really. Maybe could you tell us more about it?
Well, yeah. So if someone's on assignment in the United States from India, they're away from their parents, their siblings, and A lot of times there's a need to kind of go back and see family. So if they go back home to India, they're going to be able to see all of their family, kind of check that box off, and they're probably going to be able to stay with their family for free. But if they're applying in a third country, again, they're going to have all the expense of a trip, and they're not going to be able to see family. So a lot of times people prefer going back home instead of and kind of making it into the annual family visit while they're getting visa stamped, as opposed to doing it in a third country.
Right, right. Very interesting. Thank you so much, David, for taking that up. And moving on, I have more questions. So let's take this one up. Another anonymous participant is asking, Hi everyone, I'm heading to India for my L-1 blanket visa stamping and currently see Chennai as the only available option for scheduling. Has anyone managed to book appointments at other consulates recently? Also, is it possible to schedule both for OFC and consular appointments on the same day since I see that option in the portal? Thanks in advance for your help.
So I can't say I have all of the information on exactly what the appointment booking is in India.
Yes.
Um,
But I
yeah, so
think we
maybe
didn't
I
speak about the blanket visas, no? L1 blanket. So maybe if you have anything to say or especially highlight the important points about blanket petitions, it would be
absolutely.
great.
Yeah, I mean, blanket petitions are an excellent tool. Employers should definitely obtain a blanket if they qualify because they don't have to submit every single application to the USCIS. Instead, they
Mhm.
can apply directly at the US consulate. However, at the US consulate, there will be a little bit more adjudication, and the standard for adjudication of an L1 blanket at a consulate is a little bit higher than it is at the USCIS. And so you want to make sure you have a very strong case if you're utilizing the blanket.
All right, that's very important. Thank you so much, David, for taking that question up and also telling us about blanket petitions. Now, moving on, I have another question, and this is from another anonymous participant asking, Hello, oh, this one we've taken actually, right? We just took it. I think that's it. Okay, this is one last one. Hi, guys, I need help. My husband's L1 extension petition and my L2 extension I-539 have been filed together on October 2024, while L1A extension is filed in premium processing. Mine is not. So it's still under process. My I-94 is expiring on December 20th this year, but I have a valid stamped visa till 2027. My husband received his approval notice. My questions are, if I travel outside the USA, will my I-539 be abandoned given it's the extension of the same visa category? Let's
So
take
the
this one
answer to
first.
that is yes. The I-539 is abandoned when you depart from the US.
Okay. And the second question is, can I re-enter USA with my husband's L1 approval notice and current visa?
Yes, you should be able to. Um, you have a visa, you have your husband's L1 approval notice, he's still employed, you're still married. There shouldn't be a problem with that.
All right. Now, the third question is, if my I-539 is abandoned, do I need to apply for extension again with USCIS?
No, you do not. You will be admitted on a new I-94, so you do not need to file a new
Extension.
I-539.
All right. I think the last question is I heard about flag polling where I get my I-94 extension using my husband's L1 approval. That's right. Will it
Correct.
affect my I-539 if I cross border to extend my I-94 based on my husband's approval notice?
So I think that's really a combination of questions one and two and three. And so, yes,
Right.
I-39 will be abandoned, but yes, they should be admitted on a new I-94.
All right. All right. Thank you so much, David. I think with that, we have covered most of the questions from our groups. And well, we have another live audience who has joined us on YouTube. This is from Rajesh. Hi, Rajesh. Thank you for joining us. He's saying, I am a Canadian and would like to know if I can apply for E-2 visa based on my rental properties in USA and start a rental and property management business. Does this does this business apply under E-2?
Yes, it could. So while just owning one rental property probably would not qualify, if someone had a number of rental properties and perhaps contracts with other companies to manage their properties, and if that business, again, meets the other requirements, substantial investment, if it had employees, so it met the marginality requirement, absolutely, this could be a valid E2 business.
Okay, there you go, Rajesh. I think that's good news for you. All the best. Now, let's take up Vikas. I'm so sorry, Vikas. I kept you waiting for so long, but here we are now. Let's take up your questions. He has a series of questions actually. So Vikas is saying, if I already have a tourist visa and want to explore potential business opportunities before applying for the E2 or L1 visa, are there restrictions I should know to avoid complications during my transition? Let's take this one first.
Absolutely. So number one, as I mentioned, they should enter on B1. So when they get to the airport, they'll be asked business or pleasure. They should say business. And if the government, if the customs officer asks them what kind of business, they can be honest and say, I'm thinking about applying for an E2 or L1 visa. I'm here to explore the opportunities. Next, if they get here and if they find the right business opportunity, they can do things like meet with a lawyer, meet with a corporate lawyer, meet with an accountant. They can do business meetings in relation to setting up the business, but they cannot work in the business. So once they've set up the company, if they want to do a soft launch before they obtain the visa, which is a good idea, they need to hire a general manager to perform the day-to-day management until they obtain their visa. Getting that first key employee to manage is very important in obtaining the visa. It also keeps them in compliance because it shows that they're not working illegally in the United States.
Right, right. Thank you. Thank you for taking that up. And he has more questions, so let's address them. If I apply for an L1 visa as an executive, how do I prove my role in my current company and show that my position in the US branch is necessary? And can you give examples of supporting documents that work best?
So it's really two questions. So first he's asking, how do we prove the position in the US is necessary? The government is generally not going to ask you to prove that it's necessary. If the company wants to launch an office in the US, obviously it has to have a genuine, profit motive. And if you have a business plan that shows that it will be profitable, that's all you have to prove. You don't have to prove that it's necessary, only that it appears that it'll be profitable and that it will be able to sustain business in the United States. So the next question you ask is examples of documents. Can you read the question again, Nipasa?
Can you give examples of supporting documents that work best?
hmm Well, again, I think that the question might not be accurate, but the main supporting document to show that the business in the U.S. will be again generate profit will be a business plan. So that's the key document. It should be pretty detailed, and in the business plan, there'll be sections that will spell out, who the principals of the business are, who are the founders, what history they have, what plans they have in the United States. That's where you really make the sale to the U.S. government that this business will be successful, will be sustainable, will hire U.S. workers.
All right. Thank you for taking that up for Vikas. And Vikas, I think we've covered all of your questions. But if you still have any more further questions, you can keep commenting. And now let's take up Ganesh's question. So, what are the most effective and cost effective visa options for entrepreneurs and investors seeking to establish a business presence in the US within a short time frame under 6 months? And what are the key requirements? I think we've covered this in this
I think
entire.
that's the whole topic, right? But I think the
Exactly.
answer is this. There in the U.S. there are two investor visas. First, we have EB-5, which is an excellent program. It requires a minimum of $800,000 investment, and if somebody's not already in the United States, it's going to take them a number of years to get to the United States on the EB-5 program. So the cost-effective option is the E2 because it does not necessarily require 800,000. It could be, 100, 150, 200,000. So that is the answer. It's E2, which is the topic of our discussion today.
Absolutely. And I think with that, it also helps us wrap up a bit and probably summarize rather in a nutshell this whole topic for today. But before we go, David, I would really like to say thank you first. But also, if you could, end this session with an end note and maybe some key pointers to keep in mind so that you can leave folks out there with some bullet minds they can think about as they leave this session.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I think that the key point is that you don't have to beg a friend for a favor or for a job in the United States. Sometimes it's very hard to search for jobs from overseas. So if you have the funds and or if you have a business, then you can kind of um, you can direct your own fate. You can make a plan to be able to move you and your family to the United States within a reasonable amount of time using either an E-2 or an L-1 visa. And it's not going to cost 800,000 like the EB-5 program would. Now, if you have the 800,000, EB-5 is definitely a wonderful route. And if you're in the United States already as a foreign student or on an H-1B visa, and EB-5 is a great route. But if you're not, then you might want to look at an E-2 or L-1 as a way to move you and your family to the United States within a reasonable amount of time.
Wow. Absolutely. Thank you so much, David. And I wish we had a lot of audience. I mean, live audience, I would say, like, please give a round of applause for our guest today, none other than David R. Fullmer, who joined us from WR Immigration and also like folks, to add to how incredible David is. Well, he's a top-rated immigration lawyer and the past immigration section chair of the LA County Bar. So he was selected for inclusion in 2023 edition of the Best Lawyers in America, and in 2021 he was recognized as Best Lawyers Immigration Lawyer of the Year in Los Angeles. So I think that is a very great achievement, and thank you so much, David, for joining us and for sharing your very your time with us and all this knowledge that you could impart in this session. I'm really looking forward to have you join us again very soon.
Thank you very much.
And here's wishing you a very, very happy Thanksgiving, happy holidays to you and your family out there. Thank you so much for joining us. All right, so friends, thank you so much for joining us in this session. It was really great. Do not forget to check out David Fullmer and contact him if you want to have a one-on-one consultation, and also visit his website and send him an email. Yes, and these are his contact details. You can call him in this number 310-570-4065. You can also email David. I think it would be best to email. So note down this email address, dfulmer@wolfsdorf.com, and go visit www.wolfsdorf.com. Thank you for joining us today. You can also email me, by the way. You can contact me if you have any questions with regard to immigration or jobs in the United States. And my number is 408-335-6444. You can email me, nipa@staffingly.com. And I have another great news, and that is Monday to Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Me and my co-host, Sam, we join you with daily immigration dose here on Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. So I would like to say, please join us there in less than an hour. And until then, of course, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And also hit that bell icon so that whenever we have discussions and webinars like these, you are notified and you can join us. Thank you so much once again. Here's wishing you a good day ahead. Bye bye.